All right, welcome to day 3 of the AZ-900 Fast Track. Today, we are diving into one of the absolute most critical topics on the entire exam, Azure Storage. And I promise you, by the end of this, you're not just going to understand these concepts, you're going to be able to nail those exam questions with total confidence. Okay, let's get into it.
And look, let me be crystal clear about this. You are 100% guaranteed to see questions on Azure Storage. It's not an if, it's a how many. But here's the great news. They are some of the easiest points you can possibly get if you know what to look for. And that's what we're going to master right now.
So to get started, I want you to think about Azure Storage in the simplest way possible. Just picture a massive digital filing cabinet that can hold pretty much anything you throw at it. But, before we can put any files inside, we first need to get the cabinet itself.
And that cabinet, well, that's called an Azure Storage account. It's the main container for everything. Now see that phrase, unique namespace? What that really means, and this is the powerful part, is that every single storage account in the entire world gets its own unique web address. This makes your data reachable from literally anywhere with an internet connection. That is a huge concept.
Now, because that name becomes part of a URL, Azure has some super strict rules for naming them. And trust me, this stuff shows up on the exam. It's got to be between 3 and 24 characters. It can only have lowercase letters and numbers. That means no dashes, no underscores, definitely no capital letters. And like we just said, it has to be globally unique. No two storage accounts on the planet can have the same name.
So here's your very first exam alert. This naming rule thing is a classic trick question. They'll give you 4 choices, and I guarantee 3 of them will break these rules. So if you spot an answer with an uppercase letter or a dash or any special character, you know right away it's wrong. It's an easy point. Do not miss it.
Okay, so we have our filing cabinet, our storage account. Awesome. Now we have to figure out what kind of folders and files to put inside. See, Azure gives us different types of storage for different kinds of jobs. So let's break down exactly which tool you need to use and when. You've got your data, right? It could be videos, documents, maybe messages for an app. The single most important skill, both for the exam and for the real world, is knowing which Azure Storage service is the perfect tool for that specific job.
And this slide right here maps out that decision process perfectly. Let's just walk through it. First up, if you have what we call unstructured data, so think pictures, videos, log files, backups, the answer is always going to be Blob storage. Simple. Now, if what you need is a classic shared network drive, the kind you can map on your computer, that's Azure Files. For passing messages between different parts of your applications, you'll use Azure Queues. And for simple, structured, NoSQL data, that's what Azure Table Storage is for. And last but not least, for the actual virtual hard drives that you attach to your virtual machines, you're going to use Azure Disk Storage.
Now, of all those services we just mentioned, Blob Storage is the one you really need to know inside and out. It's a huge part of the exam because it's so widely used. They'll especially grill you on its different access tiers. See, Azure gets that not all data is the same. The hot tier is for data you're using all the time, like images on a busy website. It costs the most to store, but it's the cheapest to access. Then you have the cool tier. This is for stuff you access less often, maybe monthly invoices. It's cheaper to store, but costs a little more to actually read. And finally, there's the archive tier. This is for data you almost never touch, like long-term legal backups. It is dirt cheap to store, but retrieving it can take hours. And here is your exam alert for tiers. The exam is going to give you a scenario, and you just have to pick the right tier. It's all about the keywords. If you see phrases like long-term backups, compliance data, or rarely accessed, your brain should just immediately scream, archive. If you see frequently used, streaming video, or active website content, you should be thinking hot. It's that simple.
Okay, so we've picked the right storage for our data. Great. But what happens if something goes wrong? Well, the next critical thing we need to understand is redundancy. Just think of it like an insurance policy for your data, protecting it from everything from a broken hard drive to a full-blown natural disaster.
Let's just ask the big question here. What happens if an entire Azure data center, a whole building packed with servers, just goes offline? Maybe a fire, a flood, a major power outage. If your data only lives in that one building, it's gone. And that's exactly where redundancy comes in. So first, let's look at redundancy that stays inside a single Azure region. The most basic option is LRS, which is short for locally redundant storage. Azure automatically makes 3 copies of your data, but they all live in the same data center. This saves you if a single server rack fails. Now, zone redundant storage, or ZRS, is a huge step up.
It also makes 3 copies, but it spreads them out across 3 completely separate data centers or availability zones, all within that one region.
So for the exam, the key thing to remember is the blast radius. LRS protects you from a small failure, like a single server rack. ZRS protects you from a much bigger failure, an entire building going dark. If the exam question talks about needing to survive a data center failure while staying in the same region, the answer is always ZRS.
But what if an entire region gets hit by a hurricane? For that, you need to go geo-redundant. GRS, or geo-redundant storage, takes your 3 LRS copies from one region and copies them all over again to another region hundreds of miles away. Then there's GZRS, or Geo-Zone Redundant Storage. This is the top dog. It gives you ZRS in your main region and then copies all of that to a secondary region. It's the ultimate protection.
Okay, everybody, listen up, because this next concept is, I am not kidding, one of the most frequently asked questions on the entire AZ-900. It's the difference between GRS and RA-GRS. With standard GRS, that second copy of your data in the other region is just sitting there, dark. You can't touch it or read it unless you officially declare a disaster and fail over. But with RA-GRS, that's Read Access Geo-Redundant Storage, that secondary copy is live and readable at all times.
And that brings us to probably the biggest exam tip in this entire video. If you see a question that talks about disaster recovery and also mentions needing to read data from that secondary region, maybe for better performance for users over there, the answer absolutely must have RA for read access in the name. It is the single biggest clue they can possibly give you.
Let's just lock this all in with a quick summary table. LRS protects against a rack failure. It's for low-cost stuff. ZRS protects against a whole data center failure, great for high availability in one region. GRS protects against a regional disaster, that's your standard backup. And RA-GRS protects against that regional disaster, plus it gives you that all-important read access. Seriously, burn this table into your brain.
All right, we've covered a ton of ground. Now it's time to lock it all in with a super fast, rapid-fire review of the most important things for the exam. You ready? Let's go.
Okay, services. If you see unstructured data, like videos, you think Blobs storage. If you see network file shares, you think Azure files. Messages between apps? That's Azure queues. Just lock in those keywords and you've got these points.
And now for redundancy, let's nail the keywords. LRS is local, and it's the cheapest. ZRS is for a zone, meaning it survives a data center failure. GRS is geo, so it survives a regional failure. And RGRS is Geo Plus, that critical read access.
And for our final challenge, let's put it all together. To survive a regional outage and provide read access to your backup data, which option do you have to choose? The keywords are regional outage, that means Geo, and read access, that means RA. The only possible answer is Read Access Geo-Redundant Storage, or RA-GRS. You've totally got this.